"Are you sure that's supposed to leak like that?" Ethel hummed, her voice a low, resonant sound that vibrated with concern. She peered at the dark red fluid seeping sluggishly from a ragged tear in the fleshy layer covering the human side. It was so thick, so dark, so messy compared to the clean, glowing light fluid of her own people. He was slumped against the cold metal bulk of his ship, breathing in shallow, uneven gasps. His form was dense and unyielding, covered in strange, soft fibers utterly alien. She'd found him tangled in collapsed scaffolding near the core of a destroyed station she was investigating, barely alive. Getting him aboard had been a risk to her own mission, but leaving him felt wrong. She wasn't sure why. Her life had been defined by duty and the desperate need to protect the seed. He didn't respond immediately, his eyes squeezed shut, face pale and drawn. He was used to dealing with metal and void, not grievous biological injury. He was a scavenger, his vessel filled with the detritus of dead civilizations. She was a guardian of a living source. Their worlds were light years apart. "Leak," he finally rasped, the sound rough and grating compared to her own melodic hums. It was a word her universal translator Riskcuff, usually reliable with standardized galactic languages, struggled with, buzzing with the simple translation. Question. "Yes, that dark liquid," she clarified, keeping her voice soft, trying not to alarm him further. She gestured gently towards the wound, her bioluminescent fingers pulsing with a soft, concerned blue. "There is, much of it is that, normal for your situation." His chest rose and fell shallowly, a shudder passing through his solid form. He opened his eyes, and she felt an odd pressure, like he was trying to understand her not with his ears, but with his raw human senses. His eyes were a pale, striking blue, filled with pain and confusion, but also a flicker of something that resonated deep within her, resilience. "Normal for getting impaled by a falling girder," he managed, a faint, humorless smile touching his lips. "Pretty much." He winced, a low groan escaping him. Pain, acknowledgement, attempted humor, the cuff added. "It is suboptimal," she hummed, acknowledging his dark attempt at levity. "Your external layer, it requires sealing, and your internal systems require stabilization. Assessment, problem, solution needed." "Yeah, I figured," he sighed, trying to shift and immediately regretting it. "Look, I don't have a medbay. This is a salvage hauler. I've got sealant for hull breaches and some basic medkits for me." He gestured vaguely, then winced again. Ethel knelt beside him, the metallic tang of his ship's air mixing with the scent of his blood and something else faint and distinctly human, a complex mix of fear, sweat, and the subtle, intriguing energy that radiated from his solid form. She needed to stop the leaking. This blood seemed vital to him, but how? His biology was so different. Her own light fluid healed and sustained. This dark liquid seemed to simply escape. She looked around the small cargo bay, cluttered with his latest haul, twisted scrap, a few salvageable components, empty storage crates. No regenerative chambers, no energy conduits she could interface with, no source nodes. Just him, his basic, crude supplies, and a rapidly leaking human who needed something she didn't know how to provide. His breathing was getting shallower, the pain deepening the lines on his face. She saw a pattern emerge on his skin, a faint reddish flush that seemed to pulse with urgency. Danger, critical. Okay, don't panic," she murmured, though she felt a ripple of her own concern, a sharp, unfamiliar flicker of anxious gold in her internal lights. She pushed herself gently onto her feet, needing to think. She needed a way to contain it, slow it down, give her time to understand. Could she go back to the station? Search for compatible technology? No, too risky, too unstable. She looked back at him. He was leaning his head back against the bulkhead, his eyes closed again, the rhythmic, shallow gasps and the urgent red flush on his skin a stark contrast to the quiet efficiency of her own body. The leaking fluid was pooling significantly beneath him, more than significantly. It was spreading on the deck plates, a dark, viscous stain. "All right. Plan B," she said, striding over to a storage locker he had indicated contained basic supplies. "This is going to be Unorthodox, and probably uncomfortable, but we have to try. She rummaged inside, her sensitive fingers brushing against rough, unfamiliar materials. She pulled out what seemed to be rolls of flexible, woven material and a flat piece of sturdy fabric. He stirred slightly, his eyes cracking open. He watched her movements with a flicker of weak curiosity. Curiosity, question. "It is not medical," she explained, holding up the fabric. "But it seems clean, and this," she showed him the woven rolls, "can apply pressure. Perhaps we can make a kind of temporary seal, a pressure barrier." His eyes remained half closed, but she saw a faint movement in his light patterns, a shift in the subtle energy she could sense radiating from him, a pattern that felt like skepticism mixed with desperation. Doubt. Acceptance. "It is the best I have right now," she hummed, her voice holding a note of quiet urgency. "We cannot just let you empty." She knelt down again, the dark fluid cool and sticky where it touched her knee through her protective integument. "Will this harm you, the fabric? Is it acceptable if I touch?" She hesitated, unsure of human etiquette regarding physical contact, especially when injured. Her own people were used to the flow of energy, the shared resonance of touch. His seemed more isolated. He seemed to consider this, his breathing still ragged. Then slowly he nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement. She sensed a faint flicker of trust bloom in his subtle energy field. Trust. Allowance. The translator cuff, ever simplistic, read, agreement. "Okay, good." Ethel took a deep breath. This felt incredibly fragile, like handling something precious and delicate that was actively losing its essence. She carefully unfolded the fabric, trying to keep it smooth. The dark fluid smelled stronger now, coppery and rich, utterly different from her own clean light fluid. She needed to get close, really close, to apply the fabric effectively. She had to kneel right beside him, her arm brushing his side, the subtle vibrations from his body resonating through the deck into her own core. The heat radiating from him was higher than her normal state, a dry, radiating warmth. She tried to be gentle, folding the fabric, angling it towards the wound. As she leaned in, her face close to his torso, she focused her senses, trying to understand the intricate, chaotic flow of energy around the injury. There was a rapid, desperate pulse, a frantic attempt by his body to contain the damage. She could feel the force of his heartbeat, a strong, steady rhythm beneath the chaos, a testament to his resilience. As her arm brushed his side, she felt a subtle shift in his energy field, a moment of stillness, a faint wave of, was that acceptance? Curiosity? "Easy," she murmured, positioning the fabric. She could feel his breathing shallowly beneath her hand, the rise and fall of his chest. His skin, where she inadvertently brushed it near the injury, was warm and yielding, covered in the strange, fine fibers he called hair. She pressed the fabric down, trying to cover the worst of the tear. The dark fluid immediately began to saturate it, but the flow seemed slightly reduced. She needed the woven rolls now. She reached for them, her movement pulling her away from him slightly. As she did, the subtle stillness in his energy field vanished, replaced by a faint, flickering pattern that felt like uncertainty, or perhaps a returning wave of pain. Anxiety. Return of pain. She paused, her hand on the rolls. "I am here," she said, her voice quiet, returning to his side. "Just preparing the binders." She knelt closer again, bringing the woven material, and the subtle calmness in his energy field returned, stronger this time, a tangible wave of acceptance that seemed to flow into her own being. It was bizarre. Like he was radiating an emotional field, one she could almost feel, despite his biological difference. She shook her head slightly. Perhaps her senses were heightened by the situation. But the calm felt real, grounding. "All right, going to wrap this around you," she explained, working the woven rolls carefully. It was stiff, designed for binding. She had to be careful not to aggravate the injury. She needed to loop it around his back, under his arms, and tie it snugly over the fabric patch. This meant getting even closer. Her chest was almost touching his shoulder. She could feel his faint warmth, hear his shallow breaths, and the low groan he emitted with each exhale. As she carefully manipulated the woven material securing the knot, her fingers brushed against his skin near his neck where the fine fibers ended. It was warmer than she expected, soft but firm. He flinched slightly under her touch, his breathing hitched. She sensed a rapid, chaotic surge in his energy field, surprise, alarm, something else entirely. The translator cuff remained silent, unable to interpret the nuanced energy shift. She froze, her hand still on the knot. Had she heard him? No, his groan hadn't intensified. His eyes, which had flickered open, were wide, fixed on her face, not with pain or fear, but with that same deep, searching intensity from before, only now it was overlaid with something new, something that made the air feel charged. She finished the knot, pulling it firm but not tight enough to impede his breathing or circulation, though she had no idea what his circulation system was even like. There, she hummed, sitting back on her heels, trying to ignore the strange, fluttering sensation in her chest that wasn't entirely from exertion. The fabric patch was holding, saturated with the dark fluid, but the flow seemed significantly reduced. That should help, temporarily. She looked at him, waiting for a reaction. His chest rose and fell slowly, the uneven breath a little less ragged. The urgent red flush on his skin had faded, replaced by a faint, steady warmth. Stabilizing, improving, the cuff read, good, progress. But the other patterns remained, the subtle calm in his energy field and that flicker of something new, something intense that had flared when she touched his neck. They radiated from him, utterly alien and captivating. "Thanks," he rasped, the sound holding a note of genuine relief. He shifted slightly, testing the pressure of the makeshift bandage. He looked at her, his blue eyes holding hers. She sensed a wave of energy from him that felt like gratitude, recognition. Ethel nodded, feeling a surprising warmth spread through her being. "Just trying to keep you from losing all your dark liquid on my mission." She managed a small, soft hum that was as close to a smile as her form allowed. "I am Ethel, by the way." He tilted his head slightly, processing the sound, the pattern of her lights. Then slowly, carefully, he reached out a hand, his fingers brushing against her wrist where she was still kneeling close. The touch was warm and surprisingly rough, but sent a pleasant shiver through her. His energy field pulsed intensely where he touched her, radiating warmth and a complex mix of sensations. Connection, offering, self. The cuff attempted, inadequate as ever. Then he spoke, a short guttural sound, "Kale." Ethel processed the sound. It felt solid, grounded, like him. "Kale," she repeated, the sound unfamiliar on her tongue, yet feeling strangely right. "That is a strong designation." She met his intense gaze, feeling the resonance of his touch, the offering of his self. It was a heavy thing. She was Ethel. He was Kale. In the quiet cargo bay of his ship, a fragile connection had formed amidst the wreckage of his body and her desperate mission. She needed to get him real help and fast. But for now, he wasn't leaking as much, and he had a designation. "Okay, Kale," Ethel hummed, pushing herself fully upright, her own body complaining slightly from the unaccustomed position. "First priority, maintain your stability. Second priority, figure out where we are and where we need to go to find assistance for your kind. Do you? Can you communicate anything about where you came from, or who did this?" She gestured vaguely around them towards the vast, empty space outside the ship's hull, where the station debris field drifted silently. Kale closed his eyes, his breathing still shallow. The energy patterns radiating from him dimmed significantly, becoming almost imperceptible, save for the faint warmth around his injury site. Fatigue, pain, recall, the cuff indicated. He was clearly exhausted. She couldn't push him for information right now. Stability first. "All right, rest," she said softly. "I will monitor the barrier and the vessel. We are still drifting but stable. I need to analyze the long-range sensors, see if there is anything out here but remnants and emptiness." She hesitated, looking down at him. She didn't want to leave him alone, but she couldn't just sit here. She turned and walked towards the vessel's command center, the low hum of its life support and the faint warmth radiating from Kale the only sensations in the bay. As she reached the entrance, she heard his voice, a low, rough whisper, just loud enough to carry. "They were "The Kolari," he rasped, the sound sharp like metal tearing. Instantly she sensed a wave of stark electric blue flare in his energy field, followed by a rapid, chaotic flicker of red and black. Danger, terror, enemy. The cuff screamed silently on her wrist. Ethel stopped dead in her tracks. The Kolari, she knew that name. They were the galaxy's scavengers, its parasites. Not as overtly brutal as the harvesters, but insidious, opportunistic, preying on the weak and the broken. And they had done this to him. The air in the cargo bay suddenly felt colder, heavier. The fragile connection she'd felt moments ago was suddenly overshadowed by a surge of cold dread. She looked back at Kale, at his weakened form, the dark fluid seeping slowly into the fabric, the terror pattern still flickering in his subtle energy field. She wasn't just patching up a leak anymore. She was sheltering cargo the Kolari wanted, and they never let their cargo go. The low hum of the ship's system suddenly felt terrifyingly loud in the silence. She had escaped the harvesters only to stumble into the path of the Kolari, who now seemed to have laid claim to this injured human. Ethel stood in the entrance to the command center, her hand frozen on the frame, the name Kolari echoing in her mind like a discordant chime. Kale's ship, the Stardust Drifter, was small, old, and not built for confrontation. It was built to ghost through debris fields, sniff out salvage, and run silent and deep. Dealing with the Kolari was a different scale entirely. They had vast networks, informants, and ships that could appear seemingly from nowhere. She forced herself to turn and enter the command center, her gaze sweeping over the unfamiliar, worn consoles. The ship was stable, systems green, but they were exposed. Drifting was silent but slow. To get anywhere, she'd have to engage the drives, power up the long-range comms and sensors, and that would leave a signature. A signature the Kolari were clearly hunting for. She glanced back into the cargo bay. Kale was still slumped against the bulkhead, his energy patterns subdued, but she could still sense the faint warmth from his wound and the underlying current of terror in the blue-black flickers. He looked so fragile, so vulnerable in a way that made her core lights ache. Not vulnerable as prey, but vulnerable as a living being in distress. She had learned his designation. She had made a connection. Now the galaxy's opportunistic parasites wanted him. She ran a hand over the scarred control panel. She could cut power completely, hope they drifted past, but she had limited life support reserves, and Kale needed more than just a patch. He needed proper medical attention her species couldn't provide, attention his own kind needed to administer. Cutting power was a slow death sentence for him. Running was the only option, but running meant being found. She pulled up the navigation charts, unfamiliar as they were. They were deep in an unsettled sector, a graveyard of old conflicts and corporate failures. The nearest inhabited system he designated as safe was days away at standard cruise speed, days exposed to space, days for the Kolari to narrow their search grid. "Okay, Kale," she murmured to herself, her voice low. "Looks like our quiet investigation just turned into a high-stakes extraction." She initiated the sequence to bring the ship's drives online, keeping the power low, an instinct learned from years of trying to move unseen. The hum of the ship deepened slightly, the floor vibrating under her feet. She monitored the sensors compulsively as the system cycled up. Passive scans first. Nothing. Too early. She'd need active scans to get any real range, and those were like projecting a beacon into the void. She hesitated, her finger hovering over the activation control. The risk was immense, but staying blind was riskier. She glanced back at Kale. He hadn't moved, but she sensed a faint intensification of the blue-black terror patterns in his energy field. He could sense the ship powering up, sense the danger. She didn't know, but she knew she had to act. She activated the short-range active sensors. A quick ping, just enough to map the immediate debris field and check for anything hiding in the wreckage. The radar painted a complex picture of twisted metal and floating debris. Nothing large, nothing moving under power. She hummed a small sigh of relief. Then she extended the range just for a moment. A fraction of a second burst of energy. It mapped empty space for thousands of kilometers in every direction. Nothing. Relief washed over her, sharp and sweet. Maybe they were far behind him. Maybe he'd somehow evaded them completely. Maybe. An alarm chirped softly, a low-priority warning on an auxiliary sensor. She scanned the readout. Residual energy signature, faint, phased, almost invisible. Exactly the kind of signature rumored to be left by Kolari stealth craft. It was distant, but it was there. And it was moving. Not directly towards them, but sweeping the sector. A search pattern. Her breath hitched. They were out there, and they were searching. She shut down the active sensors immediately, the silence in the command center suddenly oppressive. Okay, do not panic. She needed data. How many? How fast? What was their probable search vector? She needed a longer, stronger scan. A scan that would definitely give them his position if they were close enough. She looked back at Kale. He was watching her now, his blue eyes open, the blue-black patterns in his energy field intensifying, radiating a silent scream of pure terror. He knew. He somehow knew they were near. "Yes," she said, her voice low. "I know they are out there." She gripped the edge of the console. "Listen, Kale, I need to perform a scan, a significant one. It is going to make us visible. If they are close, they will detect us." He didn't respond with a word this time. He simply held her gaze, his human eyes vast and vulnerable, filled with a primal fear that resonated deep within her own core. She saw a flicker in his eyes, a silent question. Why? Why take this risk? "Because," she hummed, her voice firming, "I cannot assist you if I do not know where they are. And I cannot assist you to remain alive if we simply drift here and hope they do not locate us." She paused. "And because I found you, I am not leaving you for them." A new pattern bloomed in his energy field, a delicate pulsing silver shimmering over the terror. Acceptance, reliance, shared fate. The cuff struggled, then offered trust. Trust, from a being she'd known for barely an hour who sensed the danger and radiated a surprising resilience. It was a heavy thing. She took a deep breath and initiated the long-range scan. The ship's power surged, a low thrum vibrating through the deck, through her core, through her very being. On the main view screen, a cone of light expanded rapidly outwards, searching the inky blackness. The seconds stretched into an eternity. The tension in the command center was palpable, a coil winding tighter and tighter. She watched the sensor data populate the screen. Empty, empty, still empty. Relief began to bubble up again. Maybe they were far out. Maybe the faint signature was residual fatting. Then, at the very edge of the scan range, two contacts appeared. Faint, almost ghost-like, but definite. Large energy signatures, phased and masked, but undeniable. And they were converging. Not on him, not yet. But their search pattern was bringing them this way. Slowly, relentlessly. She killed the scan immediately, plunging the ship back into passive silence. Her internal lights were flickering with controlled anxiety. Two ships, two Kolari ships. They weren't just searching casually. They were hunting. And they were good. The residual signature she'd picked up earlier must have been from one of them passing near the debris field before she found Kale. They were circling back. "Two of them," Ethel hummed, her voice flat. She didn't need to look back at Kale to know he'd sensed it. The terror patterns in the cargo bay were a silent, visual scream. They are distant, but they are coming this way, slow and methodical. She pulled up the navigation map again. Her options were limited. She could try to outrun them, but this ship wasn't fast enough against dedicated hunters. She could try to hide in the debris field, but they'd scour it eventually, especially if they suspected their quarry was there. Or she could try something else, something risky. She looked at the map of the destroyed station. It was a labyrinth of twisted metal, collapsed structures, and energy conduits. She'd only explored a small part of it when she found him. It was dangerous, unstable, but it was also dense, and some of its systems, deep within the core, might still hold residual power, might still offer cover. She turned back to Kale. He was still radiating terror, but his blue eyes were fixed on her, waiting. "Kale," she said, making sure her voice was steady. "We cannot outrun them, not out here. The only chance we have is to return, inside." She sensed him shudder, a ripple passing through his solid form. The blue-black terror intensified, but alongside it the silver pattern of trust pulsed faintly. Fear, acknowledgement, choice. The cuff read. "The station," she continued, "it is chaotic, I know, but it is dense, and perhaps there is a way to utilize it, against them, to conceal ourselves, or to evade them." She didn't have a concrete plan. It was a desperate gamble. The station could collapse on them, its old defenses could activate unexpectedly, or they could just get trapped. But staying put or running blind felt like certain capture. She sensed the conflict in his energy patterns, the battle between primal fear and the fragile trust he had placed in her. Then, slowly, deliberately, a new pattern emerged around his eyes, a deep, resonant purple, swirling with faint gold. Decision. Acceptance. Path. "Okay," Ethel hummed, a knot of tension easing slightly in her being. She appreciated his silent acceptance. It felt like partnership, even across the vast gulf of species and form. "Then let us proceed." She plotted a course back towards the debris field, keeping the power signature as low as possible. It was a slow journey back. Too slow. Every second felt amplified, every creak of the ship's hull like a sharp noise in the silence. She monitored the Kolari signatures constantly. They were closer now, their convergence point somewhere near the edge of the debris field. They were clearly systematic, sweeping outwards from the station, ensuring nothing escaped their net. As they approached the edge of the wreckage, the viewscreen filled with the ghostly shapes of ruined habitats and shattered industrial modules. It looked even more chaotic than it had before, a silent testament to sudden, brutal destruction. She needed to find a way deep inside, a place where the ship could be completely hidden, its energy signature masked by the ambient radiation and structural interference. She felt Kale's presence in the cargo bay like a physical anchor. The terror patterns were still strong, but she sensed a shift, a hardening beneath the fear. It was the pattern she'd sensed when he made his decision, the deep purple, the gold, resolution. He was ready. She guided the drifter into the labyrinth, navigating through narrow passages between collapsed sections, the proximity alarms beeping softly but constantly. Dust and small debris pinged against the hull. The light from outside dimmed rapidly, plunging them into a world of shadows and the faint, eerie glow from her own form in the command center. This was it. Their only chance. Hide and hope. Or hide and find a way to challenge an enemy he clearly knew and feared deeply. She didn't know which was more terrifying. "We need to find a deep pocket," Ethel murmured, speaking aloud to break the oppressive silence. "Somewhere shielded, perhaps near the core." The core of the station was where she'd found him. Maybe there was something there, some structural anomaly or surviving system that could offer better cover. She navigated the ship deeper, relying on short-range radar and visual cues. The wreckage was getting thicker, more complex. She saw signs of the destruction up close now, twisted girders, blast marks, but also strange, crystalline growths and energy burns that didn't look like standard weaponry. It was as if the station had been consumed by something parasitic, something tied to the Kolari. Suddenly, Kale's energy patterns flared in the cargo bay, not with terror but with a rapid, intense series of bright blues and whites. "Warning! Danger! Proximity!" the cuff shrieked. Ethel slammed the thrusters into reverse. What is it?" "There." Kale's voice was sharp, stronger than she'd heard it, though still rough with pain. He didn't need to speak her language. His energy field pulsed towards a specific direction. A section of the station wall they were about to pass. It looked like solid metal and twisted composite on her readouts, but his energy field was reacting to it. She angled the ship's sensors towards the indicated spot. Nothing, just structural mass, but Kale's warning patterns were frantic. She trusted his sensing over her passive radar right now. She eased the ship forward slowly, angling the camera view. Still nothing visible. "I do not see anything, Kale," she said, keeping her voice low. "Are you certain?" He pulsed a sequence of energy again, faster this time, then a wave of what felt like frustration washed over him. Certainty, urgency, blind, The cuff added, right. Her tech couldn't see it, but he could sense it. She took a gamble. She nudged the ship forward, extending a low-power manipulator arm towards the section of the wall he indicated. As the arm approached, the metal shimmered, just for a second, like a heat haze, but then it was gone. She almost dismissed it. But Kale's energy field was still screaming warning. She ordered the manipulator arm to touch the spot. It extended, its sensors reporting solid mass. But as the arm made contact, the metal didn't yield. Instead, a section of the wall, perhaps 5 meters wide, rippled like water. For a brief moment, she saw through it, into a dark, cavernous space hidden within the station structure. Her breath hitched. A hidden passage, camouflaged by some kind of energy field or phase technology. Kolari tech. Kale's energy patterns shifted rapidly, still warning but also with a new complexity, greens and purples mixing with the urgent blues. Passage. Hidden. Entry. A hidden passage, Ethel breathed. You found a hidden passage. She looked back at him, awe mixing with the fear. His unique human senses were picking up things her alien tech couldn't even register. It is obscured, Kale rasped, his voice weak but clear. It offers deep cover. Deep cover was exactly what they needed. And a hidden passage, even better. The Kolari wouldn't find them if they didn't know this was here. But why was it here? Was it a Kolari hiding spot, or something else? She didn't have time to ponder the implications. Okay, can we fit the ship inside? She asked. The opening looked barely wide enough. She'd have to fly the drifter through a shimmering, invisible wall. Kale seemed to measure the ship with his eyes, then his energy patterns pulsed with a pattern that felt like focused concentration. Evaluation, possibility, followed by a tentative green. Likely. Likely was good enough for her. She retracted the manipulator arm. All right, Kale, brace yourself, we are entering. She adjusted the ship's trajectory, lining up with the shimmering section of the wall. She engaged the thrusters, pushing the drifter forward slowly. As the ship's nose touched the invisible barrier, the view screen flickered with distorted energy readings. The metal rippled violently, and for a moment it felt like they were passing through solid rock. The ship groaned in protest, alarms flared, but they kept moving. Then they were through. The shimmering closed behind them. They were inside a vast, dark space within the station structure. The air felt different here, cooler, heavier. Passive sensors showed thick, layered shielding all around them, blocking external scans. They were hidden. Completely. Ethel cut the thrusters, letting the ship drift silently in the darkness. Relief flooded through her being, making her internal lights tremble slightly. They had found a sanctuary, a hidden pocket within the ruins. But the darkness also felt oppressive, ancient, and filled with the unknown. She looked back at Kale. His energy patterns were calming rapidly, the intense blues and blacks receding, replaced by soft, steady greens and purples. Safety, relief, inquiry. He was looking around the hidden space, his human eyes seeming to pierce the darkness. We are inside, Ethel breathed, slumping back in the chair. We are hidden. They will not find us here. Kale sighed, a sound of deep exhaustion. Good. He gestured with a weak hand towards the far end of the hidden cavern. His energy patterns shifted, pointing, indicating something. Direction, interest, source. Something is over there, Ethel asked, following his gaze into the darkness. She activated the ship's internal lights, casting long shadows. The cavern was huge, far larger than the ship. The walls were rough, unworked rock, but interspersed with strange, smooth patches that seemed to absorb the light. At the far end, she saw a faint, pulsating glow, not from him, but from something else. Curiosity warred with caution. Was it a trap, a Kolari installation, or something else entirely? Kale's energy patterns weren't showing fear now, only curiosity and interest. It felt safe as anything could be in this situation. Okay, she said, pushing herself out of the chair. Let us see what you sensed. She needed to move, and sitting here waiting felt like a slow descent into madness. She grabbed a portable light source from a storage compartment. "Remain here if you wish," she told Kale, or... Kale pushed himself away from the bulkhead, using the wall for support. He was still weak, his movements slow but determined. The faint warmth pulsed steadily from his injury site, the fabric bandage dark with absorbed blood. His decision patterns, the deep purple and gold, pulsed faintly again. Movement. Exploration. Together. The cuff read. "Okay," Ethel hummed, accepting his silent insistence. Together. She started towards the back of the command center, where a ramp led down to a lower level and the airlock that accessed the outside. She had a feeling this hidden passage might lead somewhere deeper into the station, or somewhere else entirely. And whatever was glowing at the far end of the cavern seemed to be calling to Kale. She just hoped it wasn't calling them into more trouble. The airlock cycled open, leading not to empty space, but to a rough-hewn tunnel extending into the rock. A chilling thought occurred to her. Had this hidden area been here before the station, or had it been built, carved out by something or someone? Ethel descended the ramp into the airlock chamber, the portable light cutting a beam through the heavy, still air. Kale followed her, his movements careful, his subtle energy felt a warm presence beside her in the metallic walls of the ship. The airlock cycled, and the inner hatch hissed open, revealing not open space but a tunnel leading away from the ship's docking port. It was rough-hewn, not like the manufactured corridors of the station. This felt ancient. "Okay," Ethel hummed, her voice low. "Definitely not part of the original station layout." She shone her light down the tunnel. It stretched into the darkness, the walls uneven rock, surprisingly smooth in places, like it had been carved by something non-mechanical. The faint, pulsating glow Kale had indicated earlier was stronger now, emanating from the depth of the tunnel. Kale stepped past her, moving towards the tunnel entrance with a quiet determination that surprised her given his weakened state. His energy patterns were a mix of curiosity and a calm, almost reverent warmth, deep blues and greens swirling with pulses of that delicate silver she associated with trust or acceptance. Exploration. Significance. Path. The cuff read. "Wait up," Ethel said, following him. She kept the light trained ahead, scanning the tunnel for any sign of danger. There were no traps she could see, no automated defenses, just rock and the strange, light-absorbing smooth patches. As they walked, the air grew cooler, the silence deepening, broken only by their footsteps and Kale's quiet, shallow breathing. The tunnel twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the rock. Ethel kept track of their path, noting landmarks she could use to find her way back to the ship. The pulsating glow grew stronger as they advanced, casting an ethereal light ahead. It felt inviting, despite the unsettling nature of their surroundings. They reached a large chamber at the end of the tunnel. It was immense, stretching upwards and outwards into darkness her light couldn't penetrate. And in the center of the chamber was the source of the glow, a structure that seemed to grow out of the rock floor like a massive, crystalline plant, pulsing with soft, multicolored light. It wasn't technology she recognized. It felt organic, yet artificial. Kale stopped at the edge of the chamber, his energy patterns flaring with intense wonder and reverence, brilliant golds and whites and swirling violets. Awe, holiness, home. The cuff read, struggling with the complexity of his emotions. "Home?" Ethel asked, looking between him and the glowing structure. "This is connected to your species." Kale didn't answer immediately. He approached the structure slowly, hesitantly, reaching out a trembling hand towards it. As his fingers neared the pulsating crystal, the structure's light changed, intensifying, shifting to mirror the patterns in his energy field. It was like they were communicating, exchanging energy. When his hand finally touched the crystal, a wave of pure, vibrant energy seemed to flow from the structure into him. His energy patterns exploded in brilliance, washing over his body, bright enough to make Ethel shield her optical sensors. The faint warmth pulsing from his injury site intensified for a moment, then began to visibly recede, the tear in his skin shimmering and closing before her eyes. The saturated fabric bandage softened. the absorbed blood flowing back into his body, leaving the fabric strangely dry and brittle. She watched in stunned silence as his injury healed completely in moments. The frantic blue-black terror patterns from earlier vanished entirely, replaced by a deep, steady calm and vibrant health. He stood taller, his shoulders straighter, catching the light from the crystal. He looked radiant, whole. He turned back to Ethel, his blue eyes shining, his energy patterns pulsing with incredible joy and relief. Healing, gratitude, connection. "I'm healed," Cale rasped, his voice filled with disbelief, dropping his work light to stare at his side. Ethel hummed a clear, resonant note, the sound pure and melodic. "This is a place of regeneration," she said, her internal translator working efficiently now. "A node, a link to the source." "A node, the source," Cale repeated, trying to process what he was seeing. This wasn't just alien tech. It felt like something fundamental, something tied to his very being. Ethel nodded, walking back towards him, her steps no longer hesitant. "My people, we are connected to these nodes. They are reservoirs of the source, the energy that sustains us, guides us, heals us." "And the Kolari, they're hunting these nodes?" Ethel asked, a cold realization dawning. If this was his species' lifeblood, their power source, of course the Kolari would want it, to control them, to exploit them. Cale's energy patterns dimmed slightly, a ripple of sorrow passing over him. Sorrow, loss, resilience. They seek to sever the connections, to enslave us by controlling the source. "And they found this one," Ethel finished grimly. "Is that what happened to the station? They tried to take the node." "They attacked the station. To access this node," Cale confirmed, his voice gaining strength. "Some of my people were here, protecting it." He paused, his energy patterns flickering with grief. "They were overwhelmed." So the Kolari had been here. They had attacked, but they hadn't taken the node. It was still here, functional. Why? They didn't take it. "They could not," Cale said, looking back at the glowing crystal structure. "The node is sentient. It rejects their touch, their intent. They tried to break it, contain it, but they could not. They wounded it." He gestured towards the crystal, and Ethel saw faint, dark lines running through its structure, marring its perfection. "And they took those who defended it as property, but they could not possess the source." Took them as property. The chilling reminder of what the Kolari did. They hadn't been able to take the node, so they'd taken its guardians instead. And Cale was one of those guardians, one of the few survivors. He had been fleeing them when she found him. "So they are still out there," Ethel hummed, the danger pressing in again. "Searching for survivors, searching for you." Cale nodded, his energy patterns serious now, focused. Assessment, strategy, path. "They know the node is here. They know some escaped. They will not abandon their search." They were hidden for now, but not safe. Not long-term. The Kolari would eventually find the hidden passage, or they would simply wait them out. Ethel looked at Cale, healed and vibrant, a guardian of something ancient and powerful. Her simple investigation mission had become entwined with the fate of an entire species, with the war against the galaxy's opportunistic villains. "Okay," Ethel said, thinking rapidly. "We cannot remain here indefinitely. Your vessel is not equipped for long-term survival off the grid, and we cannot run blind." She looked back at the glowing node. "Can this node assist us, perhaps, provide information, or energy, or—" Cale tilted his head, considering her question. His energy patterns shifted, analytical and focused. "Inquiry, possibility. The node, it is a repository of knowledge, of connection. It might." He walked back to the node, placing his hand against the crystal again. This time, instead of healing energy, a complex cascade of light and information seemed to flow between Cale and the node. His energy patterns became incredibly intricate, displaying symbols and sequences Ethel couldn't comprehend, but which radiated meaning and depth. He closed his eyes, his body still, communing with the ancient power. Ethel watched, fascinated and awed. She was a guardian used to the flow of the source, the connection to her people. This was different. A living connection to a source of power and knowledge she couldn't even begin to understand, flowing through a human. After a long moment, Kale opened his eyes. His energy patterns were intense, filled with a mixture of urgency and understanding. Knowledge, path, urgency. "The node, it has shown me," he said, his voice clear and strong. "The Kolari, they have placed a net, a sensor grid, around the debris field. We cannot leave without being detected." Ethel's core lights dimmed slightly. "A net, of course, they wouldn't leave it to chance. Can we penetrate it?" "Not directly," Kale replied, a soft blue energy pulsing around him. "Difficulty, risk. Their technology, it phases with the environment. It is difficult to detect, impossible to bypass, with standard methods." Standard methods were all her ship had. It wasn't designed for cloaking or phase travel. "So we are trapped." Kale turned back to the node, then to Ethel. His energy patterns softened, showing a new combination of gold and deep purple. Possibility, alternative, solution. "The node, it has shown me, an alternative path, a way to bypass the net, but it is dangerous. It requires traversing unstable sections of the station, and it requires synchronization with the node's residual energy signatures." Synchronization with the node's energy. What did that even mean? Her vessel wasn't designed to interface with ancient human power sources, but it sounded like their only chance. "Okay," Ethel hummed, steeling herself. "Show me the path, and communicate what I must do to synchronize us, whatever that implies." She looked at him, at the vibrant glow of his healed form, at the confidence radiating from him after connecting with the node. She had found a broken human, and he had led her to a hidden sanctuary and the potential path to escape the Kolari. Her mission had just taken a turn she never could have predicted. And looking at him, at the profound humanness and unexpected depth of his being, she found herself wanting to see where this path led. Kale led Ethel back towards the tunnel entrance, his movements fluid and graceful now. The deep blue of his calm and the radiant gold of possibility flowed around him. He communicated not just with words, but with subtle shifts in his energy field, pointing out specific contours in the rock, indicating energy flows she couldn't see on her own. "The path is through the older sections," he explained, his voice a soft resonance in the quiet tunnel. "Built before the station was damaged. They are less stable, but the Kolari avoid them too much. Interference for their sensors." Interference, that was the key. They needed interference to mask their passage through the net. Kale guided her through the tunnel back towards the ship. As they walked, he touched sections of the rough rock walls, and faint lines of light like veins would briefly pulse beneath the surface. Residual energy, ley lines, connection. The cuff attempted to interpret. He was showing her the energy pathways, the invisible network that linked back to the node. Back inside the Stardust Drifter, Kale directed Ethel to position the ship closer to the entrance of the hidden cavern, near where the shimmering portal had been. "The ship must be aligned," he said, his hand resting on the main console. His energy patterns were analytical, focused, with the ley lines of the node. "Aligned," Ethel pulsed, her internal lights flickering with confusion. Her ship had directional thrusters and a nav computer. It didn't have ley line alignment sensors. "How do I accomplish that?" "I will guide you," he said, stepping closer to her, his hands still on the console. "I can feel the flow, the resonance." He looked up at her, his blue eyes intense. "You must trust my senses more than your instruments." Trusting his senses over her instruments felt fundamentally wrong. She was a pilot. She relied on data, on readouts, on concrete information. But his senses had found the hidden passage when her tech was blind, and he was healed by touching a glowing rock. She was operating far outside her comfort zone, in a reality governed by rules she didn't understand. "Okay," she hummed slowly. "Okay, I trust you." She felt a strange current pass between them, a ripple of energy she couldn't explain as she spoke the words. Kale's energy pattern softened, a wave of gentle warmth emanating from him. Acceptance, bond, trust received. He placed his hand fully on the console, and his energy patterns seemed to flow into the ship's systems, interacting with the dead metal and glowing readouts in a way that defied logic. The ship's internal lighting flickered, mirroring his patterns. A low hum, different from the ship's usual thrum, resonated through the deck plates, a sound that felt ancient and resonant. "Now," he said, his voice a soft instruction, "adjust. Forward thrusters, slightly, 3 degrees, port." Ethel felt a moment of hesitation, but she obeyed. She nudged the thruster control. The ship shifted almost imperceptibly. "Good," Kale rasped. "Now pitch, 0.5 degrees, up." She adjusted the pitch. The ship settled into a new position. It felt wrong according to her instruments, slightly off-kilter. But Kale's hand on the console was steady, his energy patterns radiating calm certainty. "Feel it?" he asked softly, looking at her. "The resonance, the connection." Ethel closed her optical sensors, trying to feel past the familiar vibrations of the ship. She focused on the low hum, the strange warmth emanating from Kale and the console. And slowly, faintly, she began to feel it. A subtle thrumming, a deeper resonance that wasn't the ship's engines. It felt like the rock itself was vibrating, and the ship was aligning with that vibration. "Yes," she breathed, opening her optical sensors. "Yes, I perceive it." Kale smiled, a soft human expression that transformed his face. His energy patterns brightened with approval and pleasure. Success, harmony, together. "We are aligned," he said. "Now we can attempt the passage." He showed her the path on his navigation screen, not as a series of clear corridors, but as unstable sections of the station marked by energy interference and structural instability. It looked like a death trap. Sections were marked with warnings: structural collapse imminent, high radiation, plasma leaks. Flying through there was illogical. "This path," Ethel started, her voice tight, "it is perilous." "It is risky," Kale conceded, his energy pattern sober now, tinged with the violet of caution. "Caution, danger, necessity. But the net, it covers all safe routes. This is the only way that offers cover." He was right. It was a calculated risk, a desperate one. But facing the Kolari head-on or waiting to be found was a guaranteed capture. "Okay," Ethel hummed, taking a deep breath. "Risky it is." She checked her flight controls. Everything was responding normally, despite the weird energy flowing through the console from Kale. "I will maintain the synchronization," Kale said, keeping his hand on the console. "It will mask our energy signature as we pass through the interference, but you must fly the path precisely." "Precisely," Ethel repeated, her optical sensors fixed on the chaotic route on the screen. This required precision flying she hadn't attempted since her training days, and navigating a collapsing space station guided by human energy flows, not exactly in the tactical manual. She engaged the thrusters, easing the ship forward from its hiding spot. They passed back through the shimmering portal into the darker, more conventional wreckage of the station. But now, as they moved, the air felt different, charged. She could feel the resonance Kale had spoken of, the connection to the ley lines guiding them. Kale stood beside her, his presence a steady anchor. He wasn't giving her verbal instructions constantly, instead using subtle pressure from his hand on the console, a shift in his stance, a change in his energy patterns to guide her movements. Bright blue pulses meant turn left, rapid green flickers meant adjust pitch, a steady golden glow meant maintain course. It was an entirely new language of navigation, one she had to learn instantly, relying on instinct and trust. They navigated through narrow passages between crushed hab modules, under sagging support beams, past ruptured plasma conduits that sparked with dangerous energy. The ship groaned and protested, alarms occasionally chiming as they brushed against debris or skirted hazardous zones. But Kale's guidance was unerring. Almost through. Sector Gamma, Kale rasped, his energy patterns showing intense focus. Progress. Difficulty. Focus. The path was getting more unstable. Ethel wrestled the controls, correcting for micro-collapses and unexpected debris shifts. Her internal lights were flickering with the strain. She glanced at Kale. He was watching the forward view screen, his eyes narrowed, his body radiating a quiet intensity that seemed to flow into her, sharpening her focus. She could feel the connection between them, the shared tension, the mutual reliance. It was a different kind of intimacy than she was used to, born of necessity and shared danger, but it was powerful. They passed through a section where the gravity plating had failed, sending loose debris tumbling in zero-G. She had to navigate the ship through a swirling vortex of metal and plastic, relying entirely on Kale's subtle guidance. Her instruments were useless here, overwhelmed by the chaotic energy signatures. Left, now, Kale pulsed, his hand pressing firmly on the console. Ethel reacted instantly, thrusting hard to port, avoiding a massive, spinning section of hull that tumbled past where they would have been. "Close one," she hummed, her core lights pulsing rapidly. Kale met her gaze, his energy patterns flickering with a mixture of relief and grim determination. Danger, survival, persistence. They pushed deeper into the instability, the ship's hull groaning under stress. The resonance with the ley lines was stronger here, the humming filling the command center, vibrating through Ethel's core. It felt like they were moving through the station's structural unconscious, guided by an ancient, unseen current. "The edge is near," Kale rasped, his voice low. "The net lies ahead. Maintain synchronization." Ethel nodded, her focus absolute. The sensor net, the final barrier. She focused on the path ahead, a chaotic mess of energy readings and structural hazards. This was the riskiest part. If the synchronization failed or if the Kolari's net could penetrate this level of interference, they were finished. She felt Kale's hand shift on the console, a different pressure, a different flow of energy. It felt like a bracing for impact, a gathering of strength, preparation, power, passage. They entered the zone Kale indicated as the location of the net. The view screen erupted in chaotic energy readings, her instruments flashing warnings. The ship bucked and rattled as unseen forces buffeted it. It felt like pushing through a wall of resistance. "Hold steady," Kale grunted, fighting the controls. The ship was being pulled in multiple directions, the synchronization struggling against the opposing energy of the net. Kale's energy patterns were a frantic storm of activity, pumping energy, maintaining the link. She could feel his focus, his strain, radiating through his touch. Then just as quickly as it began, the chaotic reading subsided. The ship settled, moving through relatively clear space. The intense resonance faded, replaced by the ship's normal hum. "We are through," Kale breathed, slumping slightly against the console. His energy patterns softened, showing exhaustion but also triumph. Passage, success, relief. Ethel let out a long, shaky hum of relief. They had done it. Flown blind through a collapsing death trap, guided by a human's senses and bypassed a Kolari sensor net. She felt drained but exhilarated. She pulled up the long-range sensors again, cautious this time. Passive scan first. Nothing. She extended the range, a short pulse, empty space, no Kolari signatures. They were beyond the net. They were free. She looked at Kale, his form radiating softly in the dim light of the command center, the marks of exhaustion visible on his face. He had saved them. Twice now. First by finding the hidden passage, and then by guiding them through the impossible path. "Kale," she hummed, her voice filled with genuine gratitude. You accomplished it. We are through." He met her gaze, a tired smile on his face, his energy patterns radiating warmth and a quiet pride. Shared triumph, partnership, connection. "Yeah," he said, "we did it." His hand was still resting lightly on the console, the resonance between him and the ship fading, leaving behind only the quiet hum of their engines carrying them away from danger. but the connection she felt between them, forged in darkness and shared peril, remained. And it felt stronger, more real than any signal on her radar. They were free from the Kolari for now, but they were bound together by something far more complex than chains or nets. Ethel plotted a course away from the debris field, towards the nearest marginally safe system Kale had indicated, a backwater trading post called the Hive, known for its neutrality and general disregard for who was trading what, as long as credits changed hands. It wasn't much, but it had a dock, supplies, and maybe, just maybe, someone there knew something about Kale's species or where he needed to go. As the drifter moved through silent space, leaving the ghost of the station behind, the tension in the command center eased. Kale remained standing beside Ethel for a while, a quiet, comforting presence. His energy patterns were soft now, restful greens and gentle blues, reflecting his renewed health and the fatting adrenaline. Calm, safety, presence. "You should rest," Ethel hummed, turning to him. "You just healed yourself with a glowing crystal and guided my vessel through a death trap using resonance or whatever that was." Kale gave another tired smile, the kind that made Ethel feel both seen and utterly alien herself. "Yeah, resonance," he corrected her gently. "And the node, it gives what's needed." "Right, resonance," Ethel pulsed softly, looking at the console he had just interfaced with in a way her engineers would call impossible. "Still feels like magic to me." She pushed herself out of the pilot's chair. "Come, let us get you somewhere more comfortable than the cargo bay." She led him back through the ship's narrow corridors. His quarters were small, basic, designed for function, not luxury. A small bunk, a fold-out table, a terminal for manifests and messages. Nothing like the glowing caverns he seemed connected to. "It's not much," he said, gesturing to the bunk, "but it's clean and the air is good." Ethel entered the cabin, her light patterns expanding slightly, taking in the space. He moved with that same fluid grace, a stark contrast to the cramped, utilitarian surroundings. Assessment, acceptance, curiosity. He sat down on the edge of the bunk, his movements careful. The fabric bandage was gone, leaving no trace on his now healed form. "It is sufficient," Ethel said softly. She looked at him, her dark eyes fathomless. "You risked much for me, a stranger." Kale shrugged, leaning against the doorframe. "You were bleeding all over my ship, had to do something." It was a deflection, and they both knew it. He could have left her, could have reported her to the authorities for a finder's fee, or worse, sold her to someone who would have been very interested in her species' connection to powerful energy sources. But he hadn't. "The Kolari, they would have taken me," he stated, his energy patterns showing a ripple of the fear that was now buried deep. "Understanding, reality, consequence." "Yes," Ethel said, her voice low, "I perceive that." She remembered the reports, the rumors, the chilling efficiency of the Kolari. They were pure parasites, and Kale was their prey. A comfortable silence settled between them, filled only by the ship's quiet hum. The shared danger had forged a bond, raw and immediate. Now, in the quiet aftermath, facing each other without the immediate threat, a different kind of tension began to build. Awareness. Simple, undeniable awareness of another being. Kale tilted his head, his gaze scanning her form, her light patterns. His energy patterns shifted, becoming softer, more intimate, gentle swirls of green and gold, interspersed with pulses of a warm, inviting amber. Observation, curiosity, recognition. It felt like he was learning her piece by piece, through her physical presence, through the subtle, intriguing energy that radiated from her. "Your form," he said, his voice a low rasp that seemed to vibrate inside her core. "It is luminous, different from mine." He reached out a hand, his fingers hovering near her arm, the subtle warmth from his hand warming the air between them. Ethel held still, her internal lights intensifying slightly. His earlier touch when she was patching his wound had been necessary, brief. This felt deliberate, exploring. She was used to the resonance of her own kind, the flow of light. The idea of his touch with his solid, opaque skin felt like stepping into unknown territory. "Yours is different too," she hummed, her voice slightly rough with anticipation. "Solid, opaque." Kale's fingers brushed her arm, warm and firm. His skin was warm, rough, and yielded slightly under her touch as she involuntarily intensified her light. A wave of intense, vibrant golden energy flared from his fingers where they touched her, spreading up her arm and seemed to resonate deep inside her. Sensation, discovery, pleasure. The cuff registered, its reading almost comical in its inadequacy compared to the powerful physical and emotional jolt that went through Ethel. She felt a warmth spread through her limb, a tingling sensation that was both pleasant and disorienting. His energy patterns became incredibly complex where they touched, displaying intricate, swirling designs that felt like a conversation happening on a level beyond words. She felt a pressure build behind her optical sensors, like her own senses were trying to process input they weren't equipped for. "Your energy," Kale rasped, his eyes wide as he focused on their point of contact. "It is strong yet contained with many layers." Ethel wasn't sure what he meant by layers, but she understood contained. He had spent years surviving alone, building walls, burying emotions. It seemed his unique senses could perceive those internal barriers. It was unnerving and strangely liberating. He didn't push. Instead, his hand moved, sliding from her arm to rest gently against her core, right over her central light cluster. The warm, solid contact sent a jolt through her. His energy patterns there intensified, radiating a deep, resonant blue and a soft, comforting green. Presence, safety, acceptance. She felt a wave of profound calm wash over her, radiating outwards from where his hand touched her. It was the same calming energy she had felt earlier in the cargo bay, but stronger now, focused, directed. It felt like a balm on old wounds, a quiet acknowledgement of the burden she carried. Her own protective layers didn't feel threatened by his touch. They felt understood. And in that understanding they seemed to soften, to yield slightly. She covered his hand with her own, pressing it gently against her core. His human skin felt so warm, so different, and yet his presence felt incredibly strong, grounding. "What about you?" she hummed softly. "Your source, your people, what occurred?" Kale hesitated, his energy patterns flickering with a brief sorrow before settling back into the calm, accepting blue and green. Sorrow, loss, resilience. The Kolari, they came for the source, not to use it, but to deny it, to others, my people. We are tied to it. Without the nodes, we cannot thrive. They seek to control us by starving us of the source. "They want to break you," Ethel said, the understanding solidifying. It was a cruel, efficient form of conquest. Deny a species its fundamental life source and you break its will, its ability to resist. "Yes," Kale confirmed, his voice quiet. "They have hunted us across many systems, destroyed many nodes, taken many of my people for their energy, for their knowledge, for their control." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a deep ancient sorrow but also a steely resolve. "I was part of a group transporting a seed, a fragment of the source, to a new system to plant a new node. The Kolari found us. We were scattered, destroyed. I protected the seed, escaped into the station, before it was overwhelmed." A seed. He was carrying the future of his species, a piece of the source when she found him. He wasn't just a survivor, he was a guardian, a vital link in the survival of his people. The implications were staggering. She hadn't just saved a life, she had potentially saved an entire species. She tightened her grip on his hand, on her core. "The seed, is it? Did you lose it?" Kale's energy patterns brightened with a fierce, quiet pride. "Protection, success, hope. No, it is safe, carried within me, sustained by my own energy and by the node here." Within him, a fragment of the source, the lifeblood of his species, carried within his body. It explained his resilience, his ability to connect with the node and heal himself. He was a living vessel for their future. The weight of what she had stumbled into pressed down on her. She was no longer just investigating, drifting aimlessly. She was connected to Kale, to his mission, to the fight for his species' survival. Her life, once defined by duty and the desperate need to protect her own seed, had suddenly become immense, dangerous, and meaningful in a way she hadn't thought possible. She looked into his blue eyes, seeing not just a human but a being of incredible strength, carrying an impossible burden. And in his energy field, in his touch, she felt a pull, a resonance that went deeper than any physical attraction. It was a connection of spirit, of shared purpose, forged in the crucible of danger and vulnerability. "Okay," Ethel hummed, her voice firm, making a decision she hadn't consciously considered until this moment. "Okay, we need to transport you to a safe system, one where you can plant this seed, initiate a new node." Kale's energy patterns flowed with surprise, then a profound gratitude and hope. Surprise, gratitude, hope. "You would assist me beyond the danger." "Yes," Ethel hummed, meeting his gaze steadily. "Beyond the danger. We navigated it together. It appears we are intertwined in this now." She managed a small, genuine hum that conveyed amusement and acceptance. "Furthermore, someone must ensure you do not commence leaking again." Kale's human face softened, a wave of pure warmth radiating from him. Acceptance, joy, bond. He shifted on the bunk, his body turning towards her, his hand still on her core. The cabin felt warm now, filled with the subtle glow of his energy field, with the quiet hum of connection between them. The emotional walls he'd maintained for so long felt less like barriers and more like boundaries she could perceive and respected, but didn't need to break down completely. She knelt beside the bunk, drawn by his presence, by the unspoken invitation in his energy field and his gaze. His free hand reached up, his fingers gently tracing the line of her visual sensors. His touch was warm and sent shivers through her internal lights, but the energy radiating from his hand was pure warmth and tenderness. Affection, intimacy, desire. The cuff pulsed, its simple words finally aligning with the complex rush of emotion and physical sensation Ethel was experiencing. She leaned into his touch, closing her optical sensors for a moment, letting herself feel the profound strangeness and rightness of this moment. She was a guardian, alone in the galaxy, finding connection and purpose with a human male who carried the future of his species within him, whose touch could heal her ship and see into her energy field. It was illogical, and it was the most real thing that had happened to her in cycles. She opened her optical sensors and looked at him, at his solid form, at the raw emotional intensity reflected in his blue eyes. She didn't know where this path would lead or what dangers they would face. But for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel alone. She felt found. "Kale," she hummed, her voice thick with emotion she rarely allowed herself to show. "Thank you, not just for saving her, but for seeing her, for trusting her, for bringing warmth into her cold, solitary mission." Kale smiled again, his entire being radiating a soft, powerful energy that filled the small cabin. "Welcome, together. Home." The cuff remained silent, unable to capture the depth of the moment, but Ethel felt it. She felt it in his touch, in his energy field, in the silent promise of connection and a shared future that pulsed between them in the quiet hum of the ship, carrying them towards whatever lay ahead. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was a beginning. A new trajectory for two lost souls, finding each other among the stars. The hum of the drifter's drives was a steady pulse beneath Ethel's core as she sat in the pilot's chair. Cycles had passed since they left the station wreckage. Kale was asleep on the bunk in his cabin, his energy patterns soft and steady, radiating a deep, peaceful blue that somehow extended even to the command center, a subtle, comforting presence. Ethel monitored the long-range sensors, still wary, but they remained clear. The Kolari seemed to have been successfully evaded, at least for now. Their destination, the Hive, was still cycles away at their current speed. It wasn't a rapid vessel, but it was reliable. She kept replaying the moments in his cabin, the intensity of their touch, the raw vulnerability, the incredible connection she felt. his hand on her core, sensing her layers, sending waves of calm and acceptance. Her touch on his human skin, experiencing the world through a sudden, overwhelming burst of new senses. It was still hard to process, to reconcile with the solitary, mission-focused life she'd led. She glanced back at the cargo bay entrance. The small cabin lay beyond it, and inside, Kale, a human male who carried a piece of his world's life source within him, pursued by galactic parasites who had somehow found sanctuary and perhaps something more on her utilitarian vessel. Her universe had expanded exponentially in the last day. She thought about the seed he carried, a fragment of the source. Could it be replicated? Could he plant it somewhere safe and begin anew? She didn't know the details of his species' biology or culture, but she knew they were fighting for survival against a ruthless enemy. And somehow, she was part of that fight now. She hummed softly, feeling the subtle energy of the ship, the vessel that was now intertwined with Kale's path. She felt tired mentally and emotionally, but also alive, more alive than she had in cycles. Her life had been about completing the mission, protecting the seed, just enduring. Kale was a complication in its most beautiful, terrifying, and compelling form, and she hadn't run. She had stepped towards it. She pulled up the star charts, planning the route to the hive. It wasn't a direct path. She'd have to navigate around contested territories and known predator lanes. More risks, but she wasn't alone anymore. She thought about the intimacy they had shared, not just the physical touch, but the emotional exposure, the way he had seen into her and the way she had felt seen. It was a foundation built on shared danger and profound mutual vulnerability. It felt earned. She glanced back at the cargo bay entrance again, a silent question forming in her mind. He was healing, safe for now. But what happened when they reached the hive? Could they find his people? Was there anyone left to find? Or was he truly the last, his seed the only hope? She didn't know, but she was committed now. She would assist him. A soft hum from the cargo bay drew her attention. Kale was stirring. His energy patterns were shifting, moving from the deep blue of sleep to softer greens and purples of waking awareness. Awakening, presence, inquiry, the cuff read. She stood up and walked back to the cargo bay entrance. She hesitated for a moment, then pushed it open softly. The small cabin was dimly lit by the ship's emergency lights, but Kale's own subtle glow illuminated the space around him. He was sitting up on the bunk, stretching languidly, his movements fluid but deliberate. He looked up as she entered, his blue eyes finding hers in the dim light. A soft, warm, amber energy bloomed around him. Greeting, comfort, inquiry. "Hey," he rasped, his voice soft. "You rested well." Ethel hummed, a low, satisfied sound. Yes, the node's energy, the safety, provided deep rest. He patted the space beside him on the bunk. Invitation, proximity, comfort. Ethel didn't hesitate this time. She walked over and sat beside him on the bunk. The mattress dipped slightly under her weight. She was close enough to feel the subtle warmth radiating from him, to see the intricate patterns of energy pulsing within him, a silent conversation happening just below the surface. "Good," she said, looking at him. He looked so different now, so vibrant compared to the injured, leaking being she'd found. "I was concerned there for a bit." Kale leaned his head against her shoulder. His touch was warm and sent a familiar shiver through her internal lights, but this time it was pure comfort, pure connection. His energy patterns shifted, mirroring her own, easing tension, radiating peace and trust. Trust, peace, shared space. She felt her own body relax, the knots of tension from the escape slowly loosening. She wrapped an arm gently around him, feeling the familiar, solid texture of his form under her hand. It felt both alien and perfectly natural. "We have a few cycles travel ahead," Kale said, his voice quiet. "To the hive. It's not much, but it's neutral space. Maybe we can figure things out there." Ethel hummed in agreement, her head resting against his shoulder. "We will face what arrives together." Together. The word felt right. It felt like destiny, or perhaps just the consequence of two lost souls finding each other in the vast, uncaring blackness of space. She didn't know what the future held, whether they would find his people, whether they could protect the seed, whether they could survive the inevitable return of the Kolari. But looking at Kale, feeling his presence beside her, bathed in the soft, comforting glow of his energy field, she knew she wouldn't face it alone. And neither would he. For now, that was enough. The quiet hum of the ship, carrying them through the void, felt less like a lonely journey and more like the beginning of an adventure, with a human male by her side who saw the protected layers of her being and offered her acceptance in the silent language of energy and touch. The universe was still dangerous, but it was also, suddenly, vast with possibility. And maybe, just maybe, this was where she finally belonged. She closed her optical sensors for a moment, savoring the quiet intimacy of the moment, the strange, perfect fit of their disparate forms pressed together in the heart of his ship. When she opened her optical sensors again, she sensed Kale's energy patterns shift slightly, a faint question forming in his glow, mirrored by his slight tilt of his head. Inquiry, curiosity, openness. She knew what the question was, even without the cuff. It was the question hanging in the air between them, the one that transcended language and species. She looked at him, at the soft invitation in his eyes and the subtle shift of his energy, and she knew the answer. The universe was vast and they were together. What else mattered right now? The quiet journey to the hive lay ahead, cycles of shared space, shared silence, shared presence. Cycles to explore the connection that had bloomed between them in the darkness. Cycles to learn the language of his energy field, and for him to learn the language of her guarded core. The hum of the drifter was the only sound, a steady rhythm accompanying them into the unknown together.